My husband called me disgusting because of my body. The next morning, I signed the sale of his mansion for $6.8 million. I never thought that the words of someone I loved for 20 years would be the ones to restore my dignity. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if, for a second, you feel this resonates with you, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. You'll be helping me to continue getting this off my chest. My name is Carol. I am 64 years old, and until 3 months ago, I lived in a stone mansion in Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, with gardens that I cared for myself every sunrise. That October morning, the air smelled of withered jasmine as I descended the marble staircase that I had polished for 2 decades. My slippers softly brushed the steps as I headed to the kitchen, just like every morning since I married Robert. The routine was always the same. Freshly ground coffee at 7 o'clock 30 minutes, toast with olive oil that I bought at the local farmer's market, natural orange juice squeezed in the same juicer my mother gave me when I got married. Robert came down at exactly 8 o'clock, immaculate in his designer suit, his silver hair perfectly slicked back, and that scent of cologne and aftershave that I bought him every Christmas at Macy's. That morning, as I stirred the scrambled eggs in the cast-iron skillet, I heard his footsteps on the stairs. I smiled automatically, as I had done for so many years that I no longer even noticed. It was the kind of smile that becomes muscle memory, that comes out without thinking when you hear the person you love approaching. "Good morning, honey," I said, turning to him with the steaming plate in my hands. "I made your eggs just the way you like them, with a little bit of hickory bacon." Robert stopped at the kitchen doorway. His gray eyes, which once seemed to me the color of the ocean in winter, scanned me from head to toe with an expression I didn't recognize. I was wearing my light blue cotton robe, the same one I wore every morning, with small embroidered flowers that I had sewn years ago. My gray hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and I wasn't wearing makeup because he wasn't due back from work for hours. "Would you please do me a favor and dress decently?" he said in an icy tone that pierced me like a knife. "You look like a woman who just crawled out of a dumpster. With that body, frankly, you're disgusting." The plate slipped from my hands. The sound of the porcelain shattering against the terracotta floor mixed with the crashing noise I felt in my chest. The eggs scattered on the floor, staining the tiles that I had so carefully mopped the night before. "What? What did you say?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You heard me," he repeated, pouring coffee into his favorite cup, the fine china one we had bought together on our trip to London. "You're not 20 anymore, Carol. At your age, the least you could do is take care of yourself a little. Don't expect me to look at you with the same eyes." He sat down at the table as if nothing had happened. He unfolded his copy of the Wall Street Journal and began reading the financial news while I stood there, surrounded by broken glass and with my heart tearing into pieces inside my chest. My hands trembled as I picked up the porcelain fragments. Every piece I lifted from the floor seemed to take with it a little bit of the 20 years we had built together. I remembered when we bought that dinnerware on Rodeo Drive, shortly after moving into that house. Robert had insisted that it be the best quality, because a house like ours deserved the best. I had agreed, proud that we could afford such luxuries after years of hard work. "Don't just stand there staring," he added without looking up from the newspaper. "Clean it up properly. The cleaning lady is coming later, and she'll think we're slobs." I knelt on the cold floor, gathering the pieces one by one, feeling the tears start to blur my vision. 20 years serving breakfasts, preparing dinners, caring for that house as if it were a temple, waiting for him every night with a hot meal and a smile on my lips. 20 years sleeping next to him, comforting him when business was bad, celebrating his successes as if they were my own. Robert continued reading, oblivious to my pain, while I finished cleaning. When I finished, I slowly stood up, feeling the weight of my 64 years in every joint. "I'm going to take a shower," I announced in a thin voice. "Good idea," he replied without looking at me, "and put something decent on for when I get back tonight. I have an important meeting with some Japanese clients, and we might stop by the house for a drink." I climbed the stairs holding onto the railing, each step a mountain to climb. In the bathroom mirror, I was met with a woman I no longer recognized. Deep dark circles, wrinkles that had deepened without me realizing it, hair grayer than I remembered, But it wasn't my appearance that hurt. It was the look in my eyes. It was that expression of defeat that had been growing in my eyes without my noticing. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and cried in silence, because after so many years, even my way of crying had become discreet, invisible, as if my pain was also a nuisance that had to be hidden. That afternoon, while waiting for him to return, I started to remember. I didn't want to, but the memories came like an avalanche I couldn't stop. I sat on the Italian leather sofa in the living room, the one we had bought when Robert got his first big contract, and the images began to parade through my mind like yellowed photographs. I remembered when we met at a lawyers' conference at the Plaza Hotel in New York. I worked as a secretary at a small firm in Greenwich Village, and he had just opened his own practice. He was ambitious, intelligent, and he made me feel like I was the most beautiful woman in the world when he invited me to dinner at Daniel. He told me his dreams, his plans to build a legal empire, and I fell in love not only with him, but with the idea of being part of something big. During the first years of our marriage, we were a team. I quit my job to support him completely, managing his calendar, attending to his clients when they came to the house, organizing the business dinners that were key to his professional growth. I mortgaged my small apartment in Chicago to help him finance the expansion of his office. "It's an investment in our future," he told me back then, and I believed him. When we bought the mansion in Beverly Hills, I put all my savings toward the down payment. Money I had inherited from my parents, who had worked all their lives in a small hardware store in Brooklyn. Robert promised that my name would be on the deeds, that everything we built would be ours. But when it was time to sign, he convinced me that it was better to put everything in the name of his company for tax reasons. "Trust me, Carol. I'm a lawyer. I know what I'm doing," he assured me. And I trusted him, as always. I remembered the sleepless nights when he was studying to become a partner at the most prestigious law firm in Los Angeles. I brought him coffee, made him sandwiches, stayed up until 3 o'clock in the morning, massaging his shoulders while he reviewed cases. When he finally made it, the celebration was at the St. Regis, surrounded by his colleagues and important clients. In the photographs from that night, I always appeared one step back, smiling discreetly, like an elegant shadow that complemented his success. The sacrifices accumulated without me realizing it. I stopped seeing my friends because Robert needed me to be available for his social commitments. I gave up my hobbies, like my painting classes at the community center, because they coincided with his gym schedule and someone had to be home. I even stopped talking about my own dreams because every conversation revolved around his achievements, his goals, his needs. My sister Sharon used to tell me, "Carol, you're gradually erasing yourself," but I didn't listen to her. I thought that was what good wives did, that loving meant disappearing so the other person could shine. The small cruelties began so gradually that I didn't recognize them as such. First, there were comments about my clothes. "Don't you have anything more elegant for this dinner?" Then, about the way I spoke. "Let me handle the important conversations, Carol." Then, about my appearance. "You should go to the gym more often. That hairstyle ages you. Don't you think you're eating too much?" Every comment was small, seemingly harmless, said with a smile that made me doubt whether he had really been cruel or if I was just too sensitive. I gradually adapted, modifying myself, trying to be the woman he wanted me to be, without realizing that in the process I was losing the woman I was. This morning, with the egg scattered on the floor and his words still burning in my throat, I finally saw it clearly. It hadn't been love. It had been a slow erosion of my soul, a controlled demolition of my self-esteem, a process so subtle that I hadn't noticed until it was too late. The following days were silent torture. Robert continued with his routine as if nothing had happened, but I could no longer stop seeing the signs I had previously ignored or justified. The way he constantly checked his cell phone, how he had started going to the gym after years of being sedentary, the new shirts that appeared in his closet that I didn't remember buying. One morning, while he was showering, the landline phone rang. It was strange, because we usually only use that number for formal calls or emergencies. "Hello?" I answered. "Is Robert there?" A female voice I immediately recognized asked. It was Sophia. "Is he busy?" "Yes," I replied, feeling the blood rush to my head. "Oh, is that Carol?" Her voice changed, becoming colder. "Just tell him Sophia called. It's about yesterday's work." She hung up without saying goodbye. I stood there, holding the receiver, feeling a mix of humiliation and rage that I had never experienced before. How dare that woman call my house? And how dare Robert give her our private number? When he came out of the bathroom, I said with the calmest voice I could muster, "Sophia called you. She says it's about yesterday's work." Robert tensed for a moment, but quickly regained his composure. "Oh, right. We had a few loose ends to tie up with the Japanese contract," he said while drying his hair with a towel. "I'll call her later from the office." That same afternoon, I decided to go for a walk in the shopping mall in Pasadena. I needed air. I needed to be surrounded by people. I needed to feel that a world existed beyond the walls of that house, which increasingly felt like a prison. While having a coffee on the Starbucks patio, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Robert and Sophia were walking together in the main corridor, laughing, completely relaxed. He was wearing the leather jacket I had given him last year for his birthday, and she was hanging on his arm as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I watched them walk into a lingerie store together. My Robert, the man who had been telling me for months that he didn't have money to fix the heating in the house, was buying intimate wear for his mistress. I hid behind a column, feeling my legs tremble. I watched them for 20 minutes, seeing him kiss her gently on the forehead, her stroking his cheek, how they looked like a perfect couple who had been together for years. When they finally separated, she headed toward the parking lot and he toward the electronics section. I followed him at a distance, keeping several yards between us. I saw him buying a new cell phone, a late-model iPhone that cost more than $1,000. When the clerk asked him if he wanted to sign up for a new line, Robert nodded. A second phone, to talk to her without me finding out. I got home before him, my heart pounding so hard I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I sat in the kitchen, pretending to read a magazine, when I heard his car in the driveway. He arrived whistling, in an excellent mood, with a small bag in his hand. "How was your day?" he asked me, kissing me on the cheek as if he were the most loving husband in the world. "Fine," I replied. "I went for a walk around Pasadena." I saw his face tighten slightly, but he recovered quickly. "That's great, honey. You need to get out more." He left the bag on the counter. "I bought some vitamins at the drugstore. The doctor says I'm low on iron." Lies. It was all lies. That night during dinner, I couldn't help but ask him, "Robert, are you happy with me?" He looked up from his plate, surprised by the question. "Why do you ask me that?" "Just curious. We've been together for 20 years, and sometimes I feel like we don't really see each other anymore." Robert put his fork down on the plate and looked at me with that expression he got when someone asked him an uncomfortable question in court. "Carol, I think you're going through one of those crises women your age have. Maybe you should see a doctor. Check your hormones." "It's not a hormone crisis, Robert. It's a simple question." "Look," he said, getting up from the table, "I'm tired of these dramatic conversations. If you have a problem with me, just tell me clearly. If not, let's stop going around in circles about things that don't make sense." He went to the living room to watch TV, leaving me alone with the dirty dishes and a feeling of emptiness that filled my entire chest. That was his answer. After 20 years of marriage, my question about our happiness seemed to him an unnecessary drama. That morning, while he slept, I went down to his study. I knew it was an invasion of his privacy, but I didn't care anymore. Among his papers, I found something that made me tremble. A draft of a divorce agreement that he had been preparing with another lawyer, not our trusted one. The document specified that he would keep the house, the car, the bank accounts, and the company. I would leave with my personal belongings and alimony of $300 a month for 2 years. $300. The price Robert had placed on 20 years of my life. The document was dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks during which he had continued living with me as if nothing were wrong, kissing me in the mornings, letting me prepare his food, wash his clothes, keep his house spotless, while he planned to dispose of me like trash. On the second page, I found something even worse. A sworn statement where Robert asserted that I had never contributed financially to the marriage, that I had been completely supported by him throughout all these years. According to this document, I was a burden he had carried out of kindness, a woman without her own resources who depended completely on his generosity. I sat in his leather chair, surrounded by his diplomas hanging on the walls, and for the first time in years, I felt something more powerful than sadness. I felt a cold, calculated fury that ran through me from head to toe. The next day, while Robert was at the office, I called our trusted lawyer, Mr. Johnson, the same man who had drafted our joint will years ago. "Carol, what a surprise. How can I help you?" "I need to review some legal papers, Mr. Johnson. It's urgent." "Of course." "Have you spoken to Robert? He's usually the one who handles—" "No," I interrupted him. "This time I want to speak to you personally." That afternoon, I met him at his office in downtown Los Angeles. I explained my situation without going into intimate details, but making it clear that I needed to know my legal rights in case of divorce. "Carol, I'm afraid Robert is partly right," he said after reviewing the documents. "The house is registered in the name of his company, and technically you are not an official partner. However, there is something he seems to have overlooked." "What is it?" "The original deeds. When you bought the house, you signed as the co-signer for the mortgage loan. That means you have rights over the property, especially considering that you contributed 40% of the initial down payment." My heart started beating faster. What exactly does that mean? "It means that Robert cannot sell or mortgage the house without your consent. And in case of divorce, you would have the right to claim your proportional share of the initial investment." I left that office feeling different. For the first time in months, I didn't feel completely defenseless. Robert had made a mistake in underestimating me, in thinking that I was so ignorant in legal matters that I wouldn't notice his maneuvers. That night, during dinner, he announced casually, "By the way, honey, I've been thinking that maybe we should sell the house. The real estate market is very good right now, and we could make a good investment by buying something smaller." I looked him directly in the eyes. "Oh, really? And where do you suggest we live in the meantime?" "Well, I have some ideas. We could rent temporarily, or—" He paused. "Maybe it's time for us each to go our separate ways." There it was. He had finally brought up the topic. No drama, no explanations, like someone suggesting changing a restaurant for dinner. "Are you referring to divorce?" I asked calmly. Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Not necessarily divorce. We could call it a temporary separation, so we both have space to think. And the house? Well, since it's in the company's name, the logical thing would be for me to take charge of it." "You could look for something else? Something more appropriate for your needs?" I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had had in weeks. "Sure, Robert. I'll think about it." That night, while he slept peacefully believing that everything was going according to his plan, I stayed awake until dawn. But I wasn't crying. I was planning. The next morning, Robert got up earlier than usual. I heard him moving around the house with a different energy, as if he was in a hurry to start something important. When I went down to the kitchen, he had already prepared his own breakfast and was finishing reading emails on his cell phone. "Good morning," I said, noticing that he was wearing his best suit, the navy blue Brooks Brothers he only wore for the most important occasions. "Good morning," he replied without looking up. "I'm going to be very busy today, a key meeting with some foreign investors. Don't wait for me for lunch or dinner." "The same Japanese clients from last time?" "No, other clients. From the real estate sector." He put his cell phone in the inside pocket of his jacket. "By the way, an appraiser is coming to see the house this afternoon to get an updated valuation." My blood ran cold. An appraiser. He was moving forward with his plans much faster than I had imagined. "Don't you think we should discuss it first?" Robert turned to me with that condescending smile I knew so well. "Carol, honey, it's just numbers. To know how much our investment is worth. It's nothing definite." After he left, I immediately called Mr. Johnson. "I need to see you today," I said. "It's urgent." 2 hours later, I was sitting in his office, explaining the situation. "Carol, this changes things considerably," he said after listening to me. If Robert is moving on this so quickly, it's because he has a very specific plan. We need to act before he executes any legal maneuver. What can I do? As the co-signer of the mortgage guarantee, you have the right to block any transaction on the property, but we need to be strategic. He leaned forward. Are you sure you want to go ahead with this? Once we take this step, there will be no turning back. For the first time in 20 years, my voice was firm and decisive. I am sure. That afternoon, punctually at 5 o'clock, the appraiser arrived. He was an older man with a leather briefcase and a professional attitude that calmed me down. As he walked through the house, I accompanied him, observing how he evaluated every room, every detail that I had cared for over the years. It's a magnificent property, he commented while measuring the main living room. Very well maintained. You can tell it has been cared for with love. Thank you, I replied. I have lived here a long time. May I ask the reason for the appraisal? Are you thinking of selling? I hesitated for a moment before answering. My husband is considering that possibility, but I'm not convinced yet. The appraiser nodded understandingly. It's an important decision. A house like this, in this area, is worth around $6.8 million on the current market. It's not something to be taken lightly. $6.8 million. The figure resonated in my head for the rest of the afternoon. It was much more money than we had originally paid. The investment I had made with my parents' inheritance had multiplied considerably. When Robert returned that night, he was euphoric. He was whistling as he took off his jacket, and he had that satisfied smile he got when he closed a good deal. How was the meeting? I asked him. Better than I expected, he replied, pouring himself a glass of scotch. These investors are very interested in luxury properties in Beverly Hills. They say it's an area with a lot of potential for appreciation. He sat down next to me on the sofa, more relaxed than I had seen him in months. By the way, did the appraiser come? Yes, he says the house is worth $6.8 million. Robert smiled widely. Perfect. More than I expected. He took a sip of whiskey. Carol, I think it's the perfect time to sell. With that money, we could do a lot of things. Start over, each with their own share. My share? I asked, feigning innocence. Well, obviously. You would have your corresponding share too. Let's say 20% would be fine, don't you think? After all, I'm the one who maintained the house all these years, who paid the mortgage, the taxes, the repairs. 20%. Of the $6.8 million, he was offering me $1.3 million, when I had put in almost $3 million for the initial purchase and had contributed to the upkeep for 2 decades. That sounds generous of you, I said, containing my fury. I knew you would understand. He patted my knee as if I were a good child. Tomorrow I'll talk to my lawyer to start the process. These things take time, but if all goes well, we can close the deal in a couple of months. That night, while he slept soundly, I made a decision that would change everything. I got up silently. I went down to his study and photographed all the documents I had found with my cell phone: the divorce draft, the false statements about my financial contribution, the company papers, everything. The next day, early in the morning, I called Mr. Johnson and sent him all the photographs by email. Carol, he said when we met that same afternoon, this is evidence of intent to commit fraud. Robert is trying to strip you of assets that legally belong to you. We have solid grounds to act. What do I need to do? We are going to immediately block any transaction on the property, and we are going to initiate a separation of assets process that protects your interests. But Carol, I need you to understand something. This is going to be a war. Robert is not going to accept this peacefully. I understand. Are you prepared for the consequences? For the first time in 20 years, I felt completely certain of a decision. I am more than prepared. The following days were strange. Robert continued with his normal routine, without suspecting that I knew everything about his plans. I saw him getting ready in the mornings, listened to his phone conversations, watched how he constantly checked his messages with Sophia, and I felt like I was watching a play where I was the only one who knew the real ending. On Wednesday afternoon, while he was at the office, I received a call from Mr. Johnson. Carol, Everything is ready. The documents have been filed in court. As of tomorrow morning, Robert will not be able to make any transactions on the house without your express and notarized consent. When will he find out? His lawyer will receive the notification first thing tomorrow. I estimate Robert will know before noon. That night, I prepared his favorite dinner, steak with mashed potatoes and gravy. I served it on our best china. I lit candles. I put on soft music. Robert arrived in a very good mood, as he had been all these days, completely oblivious to what was coming. "What are we celebrating?" he asked, noticing the special effort. "Nothing in particular. I just wanted to make you a special dinner." Throughout the evening, he talked animatedly about his future plans. He told me about an apartment he had seen in downtown Los Angeles, perfect for a successful bachelor. He told me about his travel plans, about how he was going to take advantage of his new freedom to do all the things that marriage had prevented him from doing. I nodded. I smiled. I poured him more wine. While I listened to him planning my elimination from his life with the same enthusiasm that other people plan a vacation. "Carol," he said towards the end of dinner, taking my hand across the table, "I want you to know that I don't harbor any resentment toward you. You've been a good wife within your limitations. It's just that, well, life is short, and I think we both deserve to be happy." "Of course, Robert. We both deserve to be happy. I'm glad you see it that way. I thought you were going to put up more of a fight. Why would I resist? If you're not happy with me, the best thing is for us each to go our separate ways." Robert smiled, clearly relieved. "I knew you would understand in the end. You've always been an intelligent woman." That night we made love for the last time. Or rather, he made love to me for the last time. Because for me, it was just the final act of a goodbye. I stayed awake afterward, looking at his relaxed face in the darkness, memorizing every detail of the man with whom I had shared half my life, knowing that the next day everything would have changed forever. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Robert's phone began to ring insistently. It was his lawyer. From the kitchen, I heard his voice gradually rising in tone, passing from confusion to disbelief, and finally to fury. "What do you mean I can't sell? It's my house, my company." A long pause. "Carol signed what? When?" Another pause. Longer. "That's impossible. She doesn't know anything about laws." I heard his hurried footsteps coming down the stairs. When he appeared in the kitchen, his face was completely transformed. Nothing remained of the relaxed, smiling man from the night before. "Carol," he said in a voice that tried to remain calm but trembled with rage, "we need to talk." Robert entered the kitchen like a wounded bull. His face had completely lost that composure of a successful lawyer that he maintained even in the worst circumstances. His gray eyes now shone with a fury I had never seen in him, not even in our worst arguments. "What the hell have you done?" he yelled at me, slamming his cell phone onto the marble counter. I turned slowly from the coffee maker, with a calmness that surprised even myself. "Good morning, Robert. Would you like some coffee?" "Don't give me that nonsense." His voice echoed throughout the kitchen. "My lawyer told me that you filed some kind of lawsuit, that you've blocked the sale of my house." "Our house," I corrected gently, pouring coffee into my favorite mug. "And I haven't filed any lawsuit. I have only exercised my legal rights as a co-signer of the mortgage." Robert fell silent for a few seconds, as if he was processing information that didn't fit into his version of reality. "Co-signer? Carol, you don't understand any of this. Someone has been putting ideas in your head." "No one has put anything in my head, Robert. I simply consulted a lawyer about my rights over a property in which I invested almost $3 million of my parents' inheritance." "You didn't invest anything!" he exploded. "I paid for this house. I paid the mortgage for 20 years. "Yes, with the money I put in for the initial down payment. And you also paid for the new Mercedes and the vacations in Hawaii and the apartment you planned to buy to live with Sophia." The name of his mistress dropped into the air like a bomb. Robert froze, his face turning from the red of anger to the white of panic. "What are you talking about?" "Who is Sophia?" "Robert, please." "The Japanese interpreter. The woman you're planning to divorce me for." "The same one I saw you with the other day in Pasadena buying lingerie." He slumped into one of the kitchen chairs, as if his legs could no longer support him. "Carol, I can explain." "I can—" "You don't have to," I said, sitting across from him. "I also found the divorce draft you've been preparing behind my back. The part where you state that I have never contributed financially to this marriage is very interesting." Robert ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he made when he was desperate. "Listen to me carefully," he said, changing his strategy to a calmer tone. "Yes, I know, Sophia. Yes, we've had a relationship. But it's not what you think. It's just a midlife crisis, a temporary madness. A crisis that lasts 3 months? A madness that includes planning my expulsion from my own home? It's not your home!" He exploded again. "It's in the name of my company. Legally, it's mine. Legally, Robert, I'm a co-signer. And according to my lawyer, that gives me the right to veto any transaction." I got up and poured myself more coffee. "But don't worry. I've made a decision." His eyes lit up with hope. "What decision?" "I'm going to sell the house." And Robert exhaled with relief. "Thank you, Carol. I knew you would finally come to your senses. We can split the money equally and—" "I'm going to sell it," I interrupted him. "In my name, with my corresponding share of 60% according to my initial investment and the improvements I've paid for over these years." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert looked at me as if I had spoken in a language he didn't understand. That's impossible. You can't do that." "Of course I can. I've already spoken with a different appraiser than yours. An impartial one. The house is indeed worth $6.8 million. My share, calculated proportionally, would be $4.1 million. You're crazy. I'm going to take you to court. This is extortion." "Do it," I replied with a calmness that astonished me. "I have all the evidence of my contributions, the receipts for my parents' inheritance, the transfers I made for the down payment, the payments for improvements to the house, everything perfectly documented. Meanwhile, you'll have to explain to a judge why you tried to defraud me with false statements." Robert stood up abruptly, starting to pace back and forth in the kitchen like a caged animal. "You can't do this to me, Carol. After everything I've done for you." "I gave you a home, a comfortable life. I supported you for 20 years. "You supported me?" The word came out of my mouth with a bitter laugh. "Robert, I paid for half of this house. I kept the home running. I sacrificed my career, my friendships, my very identity to build your success. And for the past few years, while you were sleeping with your secretary, I continued to be the perfect wife waiting for you at home." "You never thank me for anything," he yelled. "For years I've had to put up with your mediocrity, your boring conversations, your lack of ambition. Everything we have is thanks to my work. Everything you have is thanks to my money and my sacrifice. But that ends today." I took a folder of documents from my purse and placed it on the table. "Here are the papers for the separation of assets. And here," I took out another document, "is the contract for the sale of the house. I already have an interested buyer who can pay cash." Robert opened the documents with trembling hands. This would leave me with nothing. The company is also mortgaged with this house as collateral. You will have your 40% of the sale. $2,700,000, enough to start over with Sophia. You can't ruin me over an affair. All men have affairs. You are not ruining me over an affair, Robert. You are ruining yourself over 20 years of manipulation, humiliation, and now attempted fraud." He sank back into the chair, his head in his hands. "Carol, please. We can fix this. I can leave Sophia. We can go to couples therapy. We can start over. Like the time you called me disgusting? Or like when you told your clients that women of my generation were only good for being housewives? Or like when you planned to kick me out of my own house without a dime?" I was angry. People say things they don't mean when they're angry. Angry people say the unfiltered truth, Robert. And the truth is that for years you have been despising me, using me, and planning to discard me when I was no longer useful to you. Just then the doorbell rang. Robert and I looked at each other. "Are you expecting someone?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, getting up. "The notary. To sign the sale. Robert's face completely fell apart. You can't be serious. I have never been more serious in my life. I walked towards the door, but Robert grabbed my arm. Carol, wait, don't do this. Think about all the good things we've shared, our first years, how happy we were. I looked him directly in the eyes. Robert, for the past 2 years you have made me feel invisible, ugly, stupid, and useless. You planned to steal everything that was mine and leave me stranded like an old piece of furniture. I gently freed myself from his grip. Good memories don't erase betrayal. If you sign that sale, you will never see me again, he yelled desperately. I'm going to go off with Sophia, and you're going to be alone forever. I stopped at the kitchen doorway and turned to him one last time. Robert, promising to leave with your mistress is not a threat. It's a gift. I opened the door to the notary, a senior gentleman with a leather briefcase who greeted me politely. Behind him came the buyers, a young couple from Los Angeles who had seen the house the day before and had immediately fallen in love with it. Good morning, Mrs. Evans, the notary greeted me. Are you ready to proceed with the signing? Completely ready, I replied. As he spread the documents on the dining room table, I heard Robert talking on the phone in the kitchen, probably with his lawyer, with an increasingly desperate voice. The buying couple was reviewing the house one last time, enthusiastically commenting on the gardens I had cared for over so many years, on the decor I had chosen with so much love, on the home I had built, and which would now become theirs. For a moment, a pang of nostalgia crossed my chest, but when I heard Robert yelling at someone on the phone about feminist sluts who don't know their place, the nostalgia completely vanished. I signed each document with a steady hand, my new maiden name, Carol Evans, shining in blue ink on every page. When we finished, the notary handed me the certified check for $6.8 million. It has been a pleasure, Mrs. Evans, he said, shaking my hand. Enjoy your new chapter. Robert appeared in the living room just as the buyers and the notary were leaving. Carol, he said in a broken voice, you just sold our life. No, Robert, I replied, carefully putting the check in my purse. I just bought mine. The following days were an emotional roller coaster that took me from the euphoria of victory to the stark reality of what I had done. Robert had left that same night, after hastily packing a suitcase and giving me a look of hatred that chilled my blood. His last words before closing the door were, "This is not over, Carol. You're going to regret this for the rest of your life." I was left alone in that enormous house, surrounded by moving boxes that the new owners had begun to bring in, feeling a strange mix of freedom and terror. For the first time in 20 years, no one was waiting for me at home. No one would ask me for dinner, no one would criticize my appearance or make me feel like I wasn't enough, but no one would say good morning either, or share the small routines with me that had shaped my days for so long. The first call came the next day. It was my sister-in-law, Patricia, Robert's sister, with that sharp, arrogant voice that had always made me nervous. "Carol, what have you done? Robert is devastated. He told me what happened." "Hello, Patricia," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I imagine Robert gave you his version of events." "His version?" "Carol, you sold the house out of spite, like a vengeful, scorned woman. Aren't you ashamed?" "What I'm ashamed of is having endured 20 years of humiliation to keep together a family that never respected me. Robert supported you. He gave you a life you never could have had alone. Robert was supported by my money, Patricia, and now he will have to learn to fend for himself. You are what? A woman who defended herself? A wife who didn't let herself be robbed? Say it, Patricia." She hung up without saying anything else. The following calls came from mutual friends, or rather, from the wives of Robert's colleagues, all with the same tone of reproach disguised as concern. "Carol, dear, we are so worried about you. Carol, don't you think it was a little dramatic? Carol, Robert is a good man. All marriages go through crises." The one that hurt the most was the call from Martha, who had been my closest friend for the last 10 years. I met her at Robert's office Christmas dinners, and we had developed a friendship that I thought was genuine. "Carol, honey," she said with that syrupy voice she used when she wanted to convince someone of something, "I understand that you're hurt, but don't you think you've gone too far? Robert came to our house last night crying like a child. He says he's willing to leave everything to get back with you. Leave everything? I asked. Does he mean leave Sophia? There was an uncomfortable silence. Carol, men sometimes make mistakes, but that doesn't mean they don't love you. Martha, if your husband cheated on you for months, planned to steal your house, and called you disgusting in front of other men, would you give him another chance? That's different. No, Martha, it's exactly the same. It's just that when it happens to another woman, it's easier to ask her to forgive. Carol, are you going to be alone? Have you thought about that? At our age, finding someone else is practically impossible. I prefer to be alone than poorly accompanied. That's what you say now. But in a year, when you see Robert rebuilding his life with that girl, you're going to regret it. After hanging up, I sat in the empty kitchen, surrounded by cardboard boxes, wondering if Martha was right. Was I going to regret it? Was the fear of loneliness worse than the constant humiliation? That afternoon, while packing my books, I found a photo that had fallen behind the bookshelf. It was from our 5th wedding anniversary. Robert and I were on the beach in Santa Monica, smiling at the camera, with our hair tousled by the wind and our cheeks flushed by the sun. We looked so young, so in love, so sure that our love would last forever. I stared at that photograph for a long time, remembering the woman I had been then. Carol Evans, 24 years old, full of dreams and plans, convinced that she had found the perfect man. What would that Carol have told me if she had known what awaited her? Would she have warned me? Or would she have been as blind with love as I was for so many years? The answer came when my cell phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Evans, this is Sophia. I think we should talk. My first reaction was to hang up, but something in her voice, a note of urgency that wasn't aggressive but almost scared, made me stay on the line. What do you want? I asked. I need to tell you something about Robert, something I think you should know. We agreed to meet an hour later at a coffee shop near Central Park. It was strange, walking to that appointment, knowing that I was going to come face to face with the woman who had been instrumental in the destruction of my marriage. Sophia was younger than I had estimated, probably not older than 28. She was beautiful, yes, but when I saw her up close, I noticed something I hadn't perceived from a distance. There was fear in her eyes, and something else, something that felt familiar, because I had seen it in my own mirror for years. Thank you for coming, she said when I sat across from her. I know this must be very uncomfortable for you. What did you want to tell me? Sophia took a deep breath before speaking. Robert lied to me. He told me that you two had already been separated for months, that you were only still living together for legal reasons. He told me that you knew about us and that you were okay with it. And you believed him? Yes, she replied, lowering her gaze. I'm an idiot, I know, but he can be very convincing when he wants to be. Why are you telling me this now? Sophia looked me directly in the eyes. Because after you sold the house, Robert became different, aggressive. Last night he came to my apartment, drunk, yelling at me that everything was my fault. That a tramp like me wasn't worth what he had sacrificed. I felt a pang of something close to compassion. Did he hurt you? Not physically, but the things he said to me. Carol, I don't think he ever truly loved me. I think he was just using me to hurt you. Why do you think that? Because when I told him we could go away together to another country, start over with the money he got from the house, he laughed. He told me that I had been an amusement, a way for him to feel young again, but that he never seriously planned to leave his life for me. Sophia's words hit me in an unexpected way. There was no pain in hearing them, but something like relief. Robert hadn't destroyed our marriage out of love for another woman. He had destroyed it because he was a deeply selfish and cruel man, capable of using both his wife and his mistress to satisfy his own needs. Do you know what the saddest thing about all this is, Sophia? I told her that neither you nor I were special to him. We were just useful. Sophia nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry for what happened, Carol. If I had known the truth, Don't apologize for being fooled by the same man who fooled me for 20 years. When we left the coffee shop, Sophia told me something that stuck with me. Robert once told me that women like you were easy to manage because they had given up on dreaming, that once a woman stopped dreaming of something better, she became malleable. That night, in my new temporary room in a hotel near Times Square, I stayed awake thinking about those words. When had I stopped dreaming? At what point had I traded my dreams for the comfort of a life I thought was secure? I remembered that before I met Robert, I wanted to travel across Europe, learn French, maybe study art history. I remembered that I had plans to open a small gallery, that I loved photography, that I dreamed of writing a book someday. What had happened to that Carol? When had I decided that Robert's dreams were more important than mine? But as I asked myself these questions, I realized something extraordinary. For the first time in decades, I had the freedom to dream again. I had money, time, and above all, I had 64 years of experience that had taught me exactly what I didn't want in my life. I took a notebook from the nightstand drawer and wrote on the first page, Dreams of Carol Evans, Part 2. And for the first time in months, I truly smiled. 3 weeks after selling the house, I was sitting on the patio of a small apartment I had rented in Greenwich Village, the same neighborhood where I had lived when I was young, before meeting Robert. From my balcony, I could see the hustle and bustle of the street, the young people going up and down carrying bags, the couples kissing on the corners, not caring who saw them. For the first time in 20 years, I had no obligations. No one was waiting for me for lunch, no one to ask what they wanted for dinner, no one whose mood dictated mine. The silence of my new life was strange, almost deafening after so long serving another person's rhythms. That morning I had done something I didn't remember ever doing. I stayed in bed until 11 o'clock, reading a novel by Isabel Allende that I had bought the day before at a bookstore in the East Village. Then I prepared an elaborate breakfast, Eggs Benedict, French roast coffee, pomegranate juice, and ate it slowly, savoring every bite while reading the news on the iPad I had just bought. It was surprising how the simplest things could feel revolutionary when you did them just for yourself. My cell phone rang, interrupting the morning peace. It was an unknown number. Mrs. Evans? This is Julia, from World Roots Travel Agency. We're calling about the inquiry you made yesterday about the trip to Tuscany. The day before, walking down Fifth Avenue, I had seen an agency with a sign that said, Travel for Independent Women, Small Groups, Big Adventures. Without thinking much, I had gone in and asked about their packages to Italy. Yes, of course. What can you tell me? We have a group leaving next week. There are 8 women, all traveling alone, ages between 45 and 70 years. 15 days touring Florence, Siena, and small Tuscan towns. It includes cooking classes, vineyard visits, and free time to explore on your own. Cooking classes? Yes, with a local chef in her own home. You'll learn to make fresh pasta, risotto, authentic tiramisu. It's a very popular experience among our clients. After hanging up, I sat on the balcony thinking about the conversation. 10 years ago, when Robert and I had traveled to Italy for his lawyers' conference, I had mentioned that I would like to take an Italian cooking class. What for? He had said. You already cook well enough. Besides, we'd be wasting time we could use to meet important people in the industry. Now, for the first time in decades, I could cook Italian pasta without having to justify it to anyone. That afternoon, I decided to walk around my new neighborhood. Greenwich Village had changed a lot since I was young, but it retained that creative energy that I had always liked. I stopped in front of a small art gallery that displayed black and white photographs of New York in the 80s. The images immediately transported me back to my youth when I walked these same streets dreaming of being a photographer. Do you like them? A voice asked me from behind. I turned and saw a woman approximately my age with short violet-dyed hair and a warm smile. They're beautiful, I replied. They remind me of when I lived around here. Were you a photographer? I was. Or I tried to be. A long time ago. And what happened? The question was simple, but it made me reflect. Life, I finally replied. I got married. Other priorities. You know how it is. The woman nodded understandingly. I'm Eleanor. She introduced herself. This is my gallery. If you ever want to get back into photography, I organize workshops for women who want to reconnect with their forgotten passions. Eleanor gave me her card, and when I got home that night, I put it on the fridge next to the Tuscany trip brochure. The following days, I established a new routine that made me feel like I was rediscovering who I was without Robert. I got up when my body asked me to. I ate breakfast while reading books I had wanted to read for years. I walked through Central Park feeding the ducks. I went to the movies in the afternoons to see films that Robert would have considered boring or pretentious. One morning, while having coffee on a patio in Washington Square Park, I saw a scene that made me smile. An older woman, about 70 years old, was sitting alone at the next table, reading a thick book and taking notes in a notebook. She was wearing a bright yellow dress and long earrings that glittered in the sun. Every now and then she looked up from the book to watch the people passing by with a smile of genuine curiosity. She reminded me of my grandmother, who always said that curiosity was what kept the spirit young. "Excuse me," I said to her. "What are you reading?" "Italian art history," she replied enthusiastically. "I'm preparing for a trip to Rome next month." At 70 years old, I've decided to study everything I couldn't study when I was young. "Are you going alone?" "Of course. It's the best way to travel. No one tells you what time to get up, what museum to visit, or how long to stay looking at a work of art." We chatted for an hour. Her name was Elizabeth. She had been a grade school teacher for 40 years and had divorced at 65. "At first I was scared," she confessed to me. 40 years married to a man who constantly told me I was nothing without him. But do you know what I discovered? That without him, I am exactly who I always wanted to be. That conversation gave me the final courage I needed. That same afternoon, I called the travel agency. "Julia, this is Carol Evans. I want to book the trip to Tuscany." "Perfect. Do you have any questions about the itinerary?" "Just one. Is there a problem if I've never traveled alone before?" Julia laughed softly. "Mrs. Evans, 80% of our clients had never traveled alone before coming with us. That's exactly why we exist." A week later, I was at JFK Airport with a new suitcase I had bought especially for the occasion. It was the first time in 20 years that I had taken a plane without Robert. The first time I was going to a place he hadn't chosen, for reasons he hadn't approved of. In the boarding area, I met my travel companions. There was a retired doctor from Miami who had just finished chemotherapy and wanted to celebrate her recovery, a lawyer from Boston who had divorced after discovering her husband had a second family, an artist from Seattle who at 60 had decided to sell her house and travel the world. We all had different stories, but we shared something fundamental. We had decided that it was never too late to start over. The flight to Florence was turbulent, but I didn't feel fear. I felt excited, nervous, alive in a way I couldn't remember feeling in years. When we landed in Italy, Jane, the Miami doctor, said to me, "Carol, you have a beautiful smile. Do you know that since we met in New York, you haven't stopped smiling?" I hadn't realized it, but she was right. That first night in Florence, from the window of my room in a small hotel near the Ponte Vecchio, I wrote in my diary, "Dear 44-year-old Carol, today, after 20 years, I feel like you again, curious, brave, eager to discover new things. Robert was right about one thing. I am no longer the woman he met. I am better." The next day, during our first cooking class at Nonna Clara's house, an 80-year-old Italian woman who taught us to make ravioli from scratch, I realized something extraordinary. My hands, which for so many years had trembled nervously when Robert criticized me, now worked the dough with confidence and grace. "Bravissima!" exclaimed Nonna Clara when she tasted my first creation. "You have the hands of an artist." That night, dining with my new friends at a hidden trattoria that only locals knew, we toasted our new beginnings. "To the women who learned that it's never too late to be happy," said Eleanor, the Boston lawyer. "To discovering that loneliness can be freedom," added Jane. "To Carol," said Rose, the Seattle artist, who taught us that selling a house can be the first step to buying a new life. When they raised their glasses to me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Pride. Pride in having had the courage to defend myself, in having chosen dignity over comfort, in having bet on myself when everyone told me I was making a mistake. That night, under the stars of Tuscany, with my stomach full of food I had prepared with my own hands and my heart full of genuine friendship, I understood something fundamental. Life hadn't ended when Robert abandoned me. Life had begun when I decided to abandon the version of myself that he had created. 6 months after returning from Italy, I was sitting on the patio of my new photography studio in Chelsea, editing the images for my first solo exhibition. The photographs were portraits of women over 60 years old, who, like me, had decided to reinvent themselves after a major life change. Eleanor, the gallery owner, had been the one who suggested the project after seeing the photos I had taken during my travels. Rebirth at 60, the exhibition would be called, and it would open the following week. My cell phone vibrated with a message from Jane, my Miami friend from the Tuscany trip. "Carol, I just saw the article about your exhibition in the New York Times. I'm so proud. See you at the opening." The article had come out that morning, a small review in the culture section that talked about how a 64-year-old woman had rediscovered her passion for photography after a late-life divorce. The journalist had been very respectful, focusing on the art more than my personal story. But I couldn't help but smile when I read the sentence. Evans proves that creativity has no expiration date. That afternoon, I had a special appointment. After months of not hearing from Robert, I had received a call from him the week before. His voice sounded different, smaller, as if something inside him had broken. "Carol, I need to see you. Please, it's important." We had agreed to meet at the Blue Note, near Times Square, a neutral place where we had gone a few times during our first years of marriage. I arrived promptly, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Robert was already there, sitting at a table in the back, and when I saw him I almost didn't recognize him. He had lost weight, a lot of weight, and had deep dark circles that aged him considerably. His suit, which was always impeccable before, looked wrinkled and disheveled. "Hello, Carol." He greeted me when I sat across from him. "Thanks for coming." "Hello, Robert. How are you?" "Not very well, to be honest." He ordered a black coffee. I ordered a macchiato. We remained silent for a few minutes, studying each other like two strangers who had once known each other intimately. "You look well," he finally said. "Different, but well." "Thank you. I saw your photograph in the newspaper, the article about your exhibition. I didn't know you had gone back to photography. There are many things you didn't know about me, Robert. Just as I didn't know many things about you." He nodded, looking at his coffee cup as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. "Carol, I came to ask for your forgiveness." "Forgiveness for what, exactly?" "For everything. For how I treated you. For the things I said to you. For—" his voice cracked slightly. "For having been blind for so many years." "What happened, Robert?" He ran his hands through his hair, that gesture he made when he was nervous. "Sophia left me 3 months ago. She went off with another man, a younger businessman than me. She told me exactly the same things I told you. That I was no longer attractive. That she needed someone who was up to her ambitions. I felt a pang of something that wasn't satisfaction, but compassion. I'm sorry." "No, you're not sorry. And you don't have to be sorry. I brought this on myself." He looked up and met my eyes directly. "Carol, these months have been the worst of my life. Not just because of Sophia, because of realizing what I lost with you. Robert, let me finish, please." His voice trembled. "I've been living in a tiny apartment near Queens. I come home every night to an empty place, with no one to ask me how my day was, with no one who cares whether I eat or not, with no one who truly loves me. You didn't have that for 20 years. "I know, and I threw it away like an idiot." He leaned forward. "Carol, I've come to ask you if there is any chance that we can try again." The question I had feared, and at the same time expected for months, had finally arrived. I looked at this man who had been my husband, who had shared my bed for 2 decades, who had been the center of my universe for so long, who had forgotten who I was without him. "Robert, do you know the moment I realized our marriage was truly over? When I called you disgusting? No, it was after that, when I realized that for years I had been asking permission to exist in my own life. When I understood that I had made my dreams so small that they fit into the spaces you didn't need." Robert lowered his gaze. I can change, Carol. I've learned. I'm sure you've learned. Pain teaches a lot. But Robert, I have also learned. I've learned that I am a complete woman without you. I've learned that I can be happy alone. I've learned that love cannot be built on the ashes of lost respect. But we could start over as two different people. We could. But we don't want to. We don't want to? You don't want the woman I've become. You want the woman I was. The one who put your needs before hers. The one who had no life outside of you. And I don't want to be that woman ever again. Robert was silent for a long time. Can I ask you something? He finally said. Sure. Are you happy? The question surprised me with its simplicity. Yes, Robert, I am happy. For the first time in many years, I am genuinely happy. Don't you miss me at all? I miss some things. I miss having someone to share a movie with on Sunday afternoons. I miss having someone to hug me when I have nightmares. I miss the companionship, but I don't miss you. I don't miss walking on eggshells waiting for your approval. I don't miss feeling small next to your greatness. I don't miss being invisible in my own life. Robert, I wish you the best. Truly, I hope you find someone who makes you happy, and that you can also make happy. But it's not me, not anymore. We said goodbye at the cafe door. Robert gave me an awkward hug, as if he didn't quite know how to touch me now that I was no longer his wife. Take care, Carol. You too, Robert. I watched him walk away down Fifth Avenue, with his shoulders slumped and his hands in his pockets, and for a moment I felt tenderness for him. But not pity, not regret. Just tenderness for two people who had hurt each other because they hadn't known how to love well. A week later, the opening of my exhibition was an unexpected success. The gallery was filled with people. Not just my friends from Tuscany and Eleanor's contacts, but people who had come specifically to see the photographs. Every portrait told a story of rebirth. Elizabeth, the 70-year-old woman studying art. Nancy, a pharmacist who at 58 had become a chef. Rose, my artist friend from Seattle, who now lived in a van traveling across the country. At 8 o'clock in the evening, after 2 hours of talking to visitors, a familiar face appeared in the crowd. It was my niece, Laura, my sister Sharon's daughter. Aunt Carol, she said, hugging me tightly, Mom would be so proud to see you. How did you find out? I saw the article. And I also saw my dad at the cafe last week. He told me you had met with Robert. Your father was there? He was at the next table. He told me he didn't want to interrupt, but he heard part of the conversation. Laura smiled. He told me he had never seen you so dignified. That night, when the gallery emptied and I was left alone collecting glasses and sorting brochures, Eleanor approached me. Carol, I have a proposal for you. What kind of proposal? A lifestyle magazine called me. They want to do a feature on women who have found their passion after 60. They'd like to include you. And what would I have to do? Tell your story. Not all the intimate details, but talk about how photography helped you rebuild yourself. It could inspire other women. That night in my apartment, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine and the notebook where I had started writing Dreams of Carol Evans, Part 2. The list had grown considerably in these months. Learn Italian, travel to Japan, make a book of photographs, teach workshops to older women. I thought about all the women who had come through the gallery that night, especially those who had approached me to say that my stories had given them hope. A 62-year-old woman had told me, "My husband left me last year for a younger woman." I thought my life was over, but seeing your photos, I think maybe it's just begun. I wrote a new entry in my diary, Dear Past Robert, thank you for calling me disgusting. Without that cruel phrase, I would have never discovered that I am beautiful. Thank you for planning to steal my house. Without that betrayal, I would have never learned to defend myself. Thank you for abandoning me. Without your abandonment, I would have never found myself. Signed, Carol Evans, 64 years old, photographer, traveler, free woman. I closed the notebook and looked at the lights of New York stretching to the horizon. Tomorrow I would have to decide whether to accept the magazine's proposal. Tomorrow I would have to continue building this new life that I had designed from scratch. But tonight, I simply wanted to enjoy something that had taken me 64 years to achieve. The peace of knowing that I was worth it, that I deserved love and respect, and that I was never again going to accept less than what was due to me. The wind gently moved the curtains on my balcony, bringing the aroma of jasmine from the nearby park. Somewhere in the city, Robert would be dining alone in his small apartment, probably regretting what he had lost. Somewhere, Sophia would be with her new love, repeating patterns that perhaps one day would lead her to the same awakening I had. But I was here, on my balcony, in my new life, surrounded by infinite possibilities. And for the first time in decades, that was more than enough. It was perfect. Have you ever experienced something like this? Or do you know someone who has gone through a similar experience? Tell me about it in the comments. If this story has touched your heart, give it a like and subscribe to the channel so that this message reaches someone who needs to hear it today.